Other main order of business for today, Logan, is that the NBA draft lottery went down, or as some would call it, the Wemby sweepstakes. And the winners of the Wemby sweepstakes were the San Antonio Spurs. So, first of all, just what's your reaction to that? What do you think of that fit? It was hilarious. Brian Windhorst was literally interviewing Wemby saying, like, you're going to be a San Antonio Spur. Just the inevitability of that is funny. But what's your reaction?
You have to be excited for the Spurs. And Greg Popovich is what did he do, man? What deal did he strike with the basketball gods to luck into this? I mean, 1999, you walk into one of the greatest draft prospects of all time, who is the greatest,
1997.
excuse me, 97. Thank you, Carson, basketball reference, always
I
by
was
my
like,
side.
is this guy talking about Elton Brand?
Elton Brand goes number one to the San Antonio Spurs. 97, you walk into a generation's greatest big man, the greatest defender of a generation, a 25 point per game scorer in the playoffs when he needed to turn it up. You walk into a dynasty, and this is hopefully what you're walking into with Victor Wembanyama. I mean, the two-way ability, he is a generational talent. I know we all saw the hype packages. This is the greatest prospect since LeBron James. If both of these guys were in the same class, this would be a real debate. But we quite literally have never seen anything quite like Wemby in terms of what he can do with the ball in his hands at this size, 7'5". I've heard 7'3" to 7'5". Does it really matter when we're splitting hairs? Like, he's a giant who can handle the ball, who has insane touch, who can pull from anywhere on the court. And then what I think is really intriguing is the two-way value that he brings, because he can be a generational offensive talent, but the real upside is what he can bring defensively and anchoring a defense. He has an 8-foot wingspan, Carson. He's averaging 3 blocks a night, and he just brings you such elite cumulative two-way value where he can be the anchor and the best player on your defense, and the anchor on the other end to be your best player on offense. And again, when you talk about his skill set compared to other guys, we've never seen a guy this big who can initiate from the perimeter. It doesn't make sense that a guy has this handle, this touch, this ability to knock down tough shots, this kind of bag at this size. But that is my one concern with Wembanyama, and we touched on this a couple of months ago during the March Madness. I do have a real concern about Wembanyama's health, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer or somebody to rain on his parade, because I love this kid as a prospect, and I hope he is every bit as good as he is hyped up to be. But Carson, as a basketball historian, I asked you this last time, we've never seen somebody this size last for a really long time at the NBA level. If you think about it fundamentally, it is just harder and tougher on these big guys' bodies moving up and down the court at this pace. The NBA moves at a faster pace than, it ever has before. We're getting up and down the court, pushing the pace. And it's tough on these bigger guys moving up and down the court. It's just tougher on their knees. And you think about these big guys through NBA history: Yao Ming, Ralph Sampson, Sean Bradley, Boban Marjanovic. And it's like, distinctly, I want to focus in on Yao Ming and Ralph Sampson because they're really similar in the ways that their knees just couldn't hold up. That is my one concern with Wemby, is durability. And if a guy this big can last for a sustained period in basketball. That being said, it's not like I'm going to say, oh, yeah, man, we got to take Scoot Henderson #1 or anything like that. The Spurs are going to take Wemby. He is going to be a beast from the second he gets in the league. My only concern is if a guy this big can stay healthy, just because we've never seen it historically in the NBA.
And I think the other, like, legitimate star top draft pick kind of guy you would look at who's 7'3" plus is KP, who certainly has not been as marred by injuries as Sampson or Yao Ming, but nevertheless has pretty consistently struggled to stay healthy throughout his career. So of course that's a concern. And we've seen Wemby already deal with some injuries, but bottom line, you take him #1 because he is just an unprecedented prospect. And I don't say that necessarily in terms of greatness, like he is the greatest prospect ever, but his skill set is something that we have never seen before. A guy who is, we'll call him 7'5". Why not? Let's be generous. And legitimately looks like he has the offensive fluidity of a wing often. And that is in terms of ball handling. That is in terms of his shooting ability off movement. Now, I do think his shot looks better than the numbers at this point. He's still only 28% from deep, but 84% from the line. And you see the kind of stuff that he's capable of. Like, I think that shot translates in a big way. But then also to be able to kill you with his shot making out of the post, to have a legitimate bag down there, to be able to read doubles, to find cutters, to find shooters, and then all the while to be a generational defensive prospect, not just in terms of size and length and dominance as a rim protector, but his fluid movement out on the perimeter too, incredibly switchable. There's a reason that he's earned this reputation. Yeah, like I think that Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson are awesome prospects, but Wemby is in a different tier, and seeing him go to San Antonio is fun. It's not the best basketball situation right now, that's for sure, because I would say that if you're looking at a lot of these other young teams, they already have like a elite young talent who you can attach him to, probably a guy in the backcourt. Like if you were going to look at Detroit, Cade Cunningham, obviously Jaden Ivey too, a top 5 pick from last year. Orlando has a couple of star young wings in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. He was very unlikely to go to OKC, but people look at that core, obviously special stuff. And San Antonio, it's Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, but the history of player development in San Antonio is undeniable. I don't know how much of that they're going to need. With Wemby, really the only thing that I can think of is just building out that frame so he can become a more reliable 5, because, yeah, he would struggle to guard Jokic or Embiid right now, of course, but that's the thing. Everybody does. I always feel like that's a bit overplayed with some of these young guys because Anthony Davis is struggling to guard Nikola Jokic one-on-one. Rudy Gobert struggled to guard Nikola Jokic one-on-one. But I don't know that it's going to be a seamless transition to the 5 for him. And offensively, too, I think the more that he can attack you as a driver downhill, the more that he can impose his physicality out of the post. If he gets all that together, yeah, we're probably looking at the best player in the world. And San Antonio, as long as Greg Popovich and his staff is there, probably has the best chance of maximizing that, just because you think Tony Parker was the 28th pick, Manu was the 57th pick, Kawhi was the 15th pick, even Keldon Johnson's developed really well for the 29th pick. Devin Vassell's developed well for not being a top 10 pick. So it's fun to see from that perspective, and it's fun to see from the historical perspective of the Robinson to Duncan to Wemby pathway. Like, that's just really cool if this all pans out. I will say, though, apparently they said on the broadcast that he'd be the best player in the league on both ends of the floor in his 3rd year, which is just ludicrous. It's going to take time. That physicality adjustment is going to be real. The consistency of his shot is going to have to develop. He'll get better as a playmaker. He's already a good one, but he's not going to be at his ceiling there as a rookie. But I felt like Evan Mobley was a special prospect, like a really special prospect, because of his combination of offensive skill between ball handling, passing, and shooting, and just awesome defensive ceiling. And then it felt like Chet was an even more evolved version of that, especially on the offensive end. And now Wemby is the next step in the evolution. But of course, he's going to adjust. I mean, the only guys who have ever been the best player in the league in their 3rd year, probably Wilt and definitely Kareem, who were 4-year guys coming out. Like, let's be reasonable with Wemby, but also acknowledge that he is one of the greatest prospects ever.
I do think San Antonio is a cool spot for him to land, though, Carson, in the sense that he's not going to be pigeonholed into any roles or expected to. He can focus on whatever San Antonio wants him to focus on. If it is the ball in his hands, right? I would have preferred for him to go to a spot like Charlotte or Detroit, because my mouth waters at the idea of a Cade Cunningham or a LaMelo Ball, a Damian Lillard and Wemby tandem. But, he'd probably be stuck with one, trying to get these teams over the hump and winning immediately. There's not a lot of pressure there in San Antonio. And then running like a lot of pick and roll and stuff like that. With here, they can kind of do whatever they want. There's no real pressure, I think, to win. Like, this is a really young roster. There are a bunch of young prospects here. For all these guys to grow together. And again, I think they can use Wemby in whatever role they want him to play. If that's on ball, if they put him on the low block, like this is his city. This is his team off the bat, and he can do whatever he wants. But what luck, man. I mean, to walk into 2 generational prospects like this is absolutely remarkable. And it's a lot of fun, because I think San Antonio, if there's one team that you're going to point to, Carson, that doesn't have a star in the league, it's them. Everybody else has at least a guy. San Antonio doesn't even have like a guy. Keldon Johnson's not a star.
So obviously the Spurs landing Wemby is the biggest storyline here. But I think what's probably more interesting because of how inevitable that is what do the Charlotte Hornets do with that second pick, Logan?
It's a really good question. They're stuck with the dilemma of, do you think Scoot Henderson is, definitively the second best prospect in this class? And are you willing to pair him up with another, ball dominant creator like LaMelo Ball? Because inevitably, what that would do is you're kind of reducing the spacing on your team. Scoot's not a great floor spacer at this point. And again, these are both guys who thrive with the ball in their hands. But is he dominant enough to force your hand into, be the guy that you take here too? In my opinion, I think the more seamless fit and the better option for them is to go ahead and take Brandon Miller. I know he struggled throughout the NCAA tournament. March Madness was not kind to Brandon Miller. He had a lot of stuff going on at the time, but again, I think there's a more seamless fit where he is so effective as a spot up and catch and shooter. His stroke is just pure, man. I don't have any worries about his shot translating. That is a skill set that you just want to put next to LaMelo Ball. And then you think about the star upside with what he can do as a shot creator with the ball in his hands. I mean, this guy is 6'9", 200 pounds with a 6'11" wingspan, but he moves and plays like a smaller guard, like he's 6'6". He's got crazy bounce. He's got a great handle, and he's really good at getting downhill too and drawing fouls. That was something we noted. Nearly 5 free throw attempts per game. I don't think he's a great finisher inside the arc with his pull-up shots and stuff like that, but that's going to come with time. But I trust his shot making. I trust his three-point shot. I trust this kid in isolation. I think he's a stone cold bucket. He's an explosive athlete with a good handle. And like I said, the big thing with Charlotte is I think this kid can thrive in multiple roles. That is off ball to LaMelo Ball, attacking closeouts, knocking down catch and shoot attempts, but also with the ball in his hands, being a go-to shot creator who can knock down shots off the dribble from behind the arc in the mid-range and get downhill in isolation. To me, it's not a no-brainer because Scoot is a very good prospect, but I think Brandon Miller, when you have that on-ball creator already, is just a seamless fit with a lot of upside. So that's what I would do with the second pick if I was Charlotte.
I would take Brandon Miller too. And I know some people are saying like Scoot's the best prospect available. You take him, fit doesn't matter. And that's maybe how I would feel if I didn't think that they were neck and neck as actual prospects. And I actually think that I might slightly prefer Brandon Miller because I think that versatility, the seamless translatability of so many of these high value wing traits, like unbelievable pure shooter of the basketball, very versatile defender, a guy who we've seen thrive as like that secondary rim protector, has great ball instincts there, but also who at times was tasked with guarding the team's opposing best perimeter player, and I think can do reasonably well in that role. I think he'll probably be more valuable as that sort of secondary rim protector in the NBA, but an awesome two-way prospect who also has those like traits that could elevate you to superstar status, some of which you mentioned. I think he showed us real playmaking chops. I think that he is a legitimately advanced ball handler, especially for his size at 6'9". I think that he has abnormally good feel out of pick and roll, his ability to manipulate defenders, to trap them on his back, to draw fouls, the variety of his shot making. Like I've said this before, but people were hyping up Jabari Smith as the potential #1 pick last year. I think that Brandon Miller is leagues above Jabari Smith, who was just so much less fluid, so much less versatile in terms of his offensive skill set, inferior as a playmaker. Brandon Miller has kind of got it all for a wing. And I think Scoot is really, really great, like an incredibly dynamic athlete who also has this really high two-way ceiling, like long, crazy athletic, got a motor. He's a good rebounder, great hands, can legitimately like block shots with some regularity, and a good playmaker, like some very advanced stuff there. Not perfect, room for polish, but has the tools to be like a prototypical hyper athletic star two-way guard. And although the shot isn't super reliable, 27% from deep in the G League, his mid-range pull-up he loves, and he can be lights out there, and the shot looks good. So I do think that it comes along. But when I feel so much better about the fit with Miller, like, I don't know, man. LaMelo really sharing primary ball handling duties with another guard, I don't like. I don't think that LaMelo or Scoot really work away from the ball. Neither of them are good enough in that spot-up shooting role. Both of them are control the tempo of the game, dictate kind of every possession kind of guys. So when I think Brandon Miller is, again, like the slightly better prospect anyways, for me, it would be a no-brainer. I just don't want to understate how good Brandon Miller is. I mean, the guy was the National Player of the Year as a freshman, best player on the number 1 team in the country, and that's not how you measure greatness as a prospect, but it comes along with a lot of great NBA traits, and obviously there are concerns about the off-court stuff just with his entire involvement in that terrible shooting at Alabama, his association with that at all, and he didn't play well in the tournament. But I think as a basketball prospect, he is a special guy. So then we move to Portland, who I think are at an interesting spot too, because you have this obviously very high pick no matter what. Potentially Scoot is on the board, this dynamic young guard, and you have 33-year-old next season Damian Lillard. So how do you see them proceeding?
It is an interesting dynamic. And in situations like this in the NFL draft, you would see a team without a thought. They would move down, they would trade down, and they would get more assets. They would find another position that they like or another prospect they like later in the draft. Basketball's different. You know, you take the guy that's best available more often than not. And I think that's what Portland should do. I think that's what you do. I think you take Scoot. I mean, I like the Thompson boys. I like Jarris Walker. Walker has shot up my draft board since I had him basically fringe lottery. I think he is a top 5 kind of guy where I would consider him, you know, somewhere in this tier of guys. The Thompson guys, they've got a little too much concern with me for their shots. And I just think Scoot is, again, in a different tier. I think these 3 guys are in a different tier than these other guys as prospects. Scoot has got that explosive guard build that you rarely see in the NBA. It is terrifying the way he can get to the rack, the way he can get to the hole, how effortless it is for him to get into the lane, how good he is at operating out of the pick and roll, how far along he is as a playmaker. I say screw the fit. I mean, I wouldn't worry about the fit. And the bigger thing is too, Carson, if you had an opportunity, if you were Portland, to take a guy that would put you into playoff contention right now, maybe you take that guy, you know, or I don't even mean playoff contention. I mean championship contention. Scoot gives you maneuverability moving in the future where if Damian Lillard finally does want to go compete for that title, it gives you a flexibility where you can say, all right, well, we've got another ball dominant guard that we can thrust into the starting role. And for the time being, you either play him off ball and you get him to figure it out, or you move Scoot to the bench and let him get, 28 minutes of burn as the 6th man and really run that unit while Dame does his thing with the starters. It is tough because you've got Ant Simons, you've got Damian Lillard, and now you're going to have Scoot Henderson. Those are 3 really damn guards, really damn good guards, excuse me. But again, I don't really see any other prospects in this tier, Carson, that would force my hand in other positions where I go, yeah, they help this team really win now, really compete for a title. So I say take the best guy available and go ahead, let it. It's not going to be a seamless fit, but it gives you flexibility moving forward and you get the best guy on the board. And I think Scoot's going to be a stud. So I would say here, if you can get a whole lot of draft capital back, maybe not move too far down in the draft, go for it. But if it's not there, man, don't be afraid. You're getting if not a home run with Wemby or Brandon, I mean, you're getting a triple or damn near close to a home run. I think Scoot's going to be a stud, man.
You take Scoot no matter what. Scoot is more important than Dame at this point, and I would move on from Dame. And I'm sorry if you're a Trailblazers fan and you don't want to hear this talk anymore, and there's constantly conflicting stuff. Dame obviously saying he doesn't want to run from the grind, the Blazers committing to retooling, and we do repeatedly see them move in that direction. Like last year, obviously, that offseason, bringing in Jeremy Grant and whatnot. But you're not going to open up a title ceiling. There's no path to them opening up a title ceiling, in my opinion. I don't really see that star out there who is going to become readily available. They do have assets, but then if they're giving up Anthony Simons and the number 3 pick, I don't know what caliber of star we're talking about. I just feel like then you're depleting your depth to a point where it's just too long of a shot. And you've been in the same mindset for over half a decade now of, okay, we keep retooling. And Dame He's about to be 33. You're fresh off of just shutting him down for the season, and the year before was a waste. And I just think you are now at a point where you have a very talented core developing for the next timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I love Ant Simons, dude. I think Ant Simons is a nasty scorer of the basketball, special out of pick and roll, unbelievable shot maker, awesome touch. And he's 23. Shaedon Sharpe, I think, has an incredibly high ceiling because of his athleticism and his shooting. And I thought that he had a very promising rookie campaign. Now you're bringing in Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller. That is like an unbelievable prospect. So run with that. You're not opening the title ceiling. Go to Miami. Like, that is feasible. Miami is one of these teams you look at and they actually have assets. They have all their firsts except for 2025. Hero, I don't know if you love the asset on the contract, but it's a talented young player on a contract that can actually move these talks along. Then all you need is a couple more mid-sized contracts and boom, the money works. And then you build around that. That's what I would do. Again, if they're trading this pick, which star is it for? I don't know. It feels like a vast majority of these guys, their teams have like just committed to, or you try to pluck one of the Raptors guys. I don't know, man. I would just keep it simple. I would look at the abundance of young talent and focus in on that. But we'll see if they do. Speaking of abundance of young talent, the Houston Rockets have yet another crack at a top 5 pick. So I think they're going to take Amen Thompson. To me, he's a clear 4. What do you think, and how would you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think you've got to take Amen Thompson right here in the draft. He's an otherworldly, I mean, a freak athlete, dude. I mean, he's got crazy bounce. He's got great burst. And again, you talk about feel for the game, playmaking chops. I think you have to do that here because, I mean, that's what you're sorely lacking here in Houston. Look, man, I like KPJ, right? Good scorer, nice off the dribble, can create for others a little bit, but it's KPJ. Like, I like KPJ, man. He's a good young player, but doesn't have star written on him. I can see Amen becoming a star here in Houston. Now, I don't love his game. I need to see the shot come along a little bit. He's at 25% from deep with overtime elite and 66% from the line. Those are real concerns. And you've seen it with him at overtime elite, and you're going to see it if his shot is not falling in the NBA. Defenses are not going to respect him. They are going to sag off. They are going to opt to let him shoot. And that is not going to be good offense. I mean, it kills offense in the NBA. When you can let a guy on the help side come off, that's good, though, because, I mean, Amen mostly is going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to have to share it with Jalen Green. But, again, that's why I think Houston really needs a guy like Amen, a guy who's a really good playmaker, who is going to create for others. Jalen Green has a lot of similarities to Michael Porter Jr. in the sense that he's never seen a shot that he doesn't like. Jalen Green, when he gets that ball in his hands, is going to shoot. And you need a guy who's going to set the table for other guys. There's not a real table setter here. Again, I like Kevin Porter Jr. There's different ceilings with a guy like Amen Thompson. So he is a little bit flawed. I want to see his jumper translate because that is something that NBA defenses are going to be able to exploit when he comes up. It just has to be better because they're not going to respect him. But he's got great two-way value. I think he can be a great defender. He's 6'7", 6'9" wingspan. He's a long, tall playmaker who can see over the tops of defenses and just sees passing angles that other guys don't. And he's a crazy athlete who's going to rebound well. He's going to play great defense. And again, he's going to set the table for other guys. There's nobody like that here in Houston. And there is an abundance of young talent to let them grow together. Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green, let them rock together. We'll see what they do long-term with Sengun, KPJ, guys like that. I think Amen is the pick. And I like the fit. It's going to be weird, though, man, seeing a guy take the rock out of Jalen Green's hands, but I think it's something that he needs, man.
I really like Amen. I think that he has a special ceiling and is the kind of guy who, I've said before, if you dropped him in like the 2020 class where Ant was seen as a flawed prospect, LaMelo was seen as a flawed prospect, he'd be in that number 1 pick conversation. But this class is so great that we see him as a tier 2 guy, but probably has the quickest first step of any 6'7" guy I've ever seen, and is an awesome vertical athlete too. Incredibly high playmaking ceiling, so inventive as a passer, throws with crazy velocity, one-handed passes, loves no looks, jump passes, disguises things well as a playmaker, can see over the defense, obviously, and then has a really high two-way ceiling. Crazy athlete who does play with a high motor, awesome ball instincts, can be like this monstrous shot blocker, can defend multiple positions, really good handle, pretty special handle for his size. But what he needs is just polish across the board. I mean, his jump shot is completely broken right now. His floater game doesn't exist, and he's going to need one of those two at the least to keep NBA defenses honest. They're just going to play drop. And yeah, he's a special enough athlete that he may be able to get some good looks at the rim against that. But every star guard in the league right now can at least keep you decently honest. Like Ja is going to shoot in the low 30s from three at the very least. And Amen doesn't look like he's even there yet. But a really, really specially talented player. I am just a bit concerned about him going to Houston because of the directionless chaos that we've seen from them. And I think bringing in Ime Udoka is very good because that's a very good basketball coach, and Steven Silas was not. I also think Jalen Green is a very shoot-first basketball player. Jabari Smith is a guy who is not developed as a playmaker, is going to want to shoot the ball quite readily. And so putting a man into an environment where maybe he's expected to dictate things a bit more, but he still needs to really refine his game and develop stuff, it concerns me a bit, but I still think that he's a no-brainer at number 4 because of that advantage that he just has in talent over any other prospect. So 5 and 6, I think, are like the last two really interesting spots because it's Detroit and Orlando, two teams that I was hoping would land somewhere in that top 3 because I think that they have such promising young foundations, but they end up getting a little bit of the short end of the stick. Are there any fits that stand out for either of those two teams that you really like?
Yeah, definitely. I think for Detroit, you're looking at off-ball guys. I do want to say, I think at this spot, I think if you took Cam Whitmore or if you took Taylor Hendricks, they're good fits. Cam Whitmore is explosive as an athlete. Not as great a shooter as a guy like Taylor Hendricks, but they're both going to bring defensive and positional versatility. Whitmore, I think, brings more upside as a future shot creator, as a guy who can really do it all as a wing, attack downhill too. I comped him to like a mild Miles Bridges, something like that. But I think there's one guy that sticks out a little more who's in a different class, and that was somebody I was very critical of. That's Jarris Walker. I think he would be a really good fit for the Detroit Pistons and the things that they have built up. Because to me, if the Pistons didn't get Wemby and didn't get Brandon Miller, I was like, I don't really think Scoot works here, right? I don't really think Amen Thompson works here. If you're invested in Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, you don't need other ball-dominant guys who aren't effective off the ball. So I really do think the Jarris Walker fit is good here. He is a freaky athlete, man. This kid is 6'8", 240 with with a 7'2" wingspan. He's only 19 years old. He's got insane bunnies. And my big concern with him at the midway point was, I want this kid to be more physical on the low block. I want him to really stop settling for shots. And I think that's the biggest difference. Limit that in-between game, but I think the ceiling is insane for Jarris. He averaged over a steal and a block per game at Houston. Is going to be impactful on the boards. He's going to have all this defensive versatility as a help side rim protector, as a guy who can impact stuff on the perimeter. He's going to be a great cutter, a real lob threat in that dunker spot. And if his shot comes along, I mean, you're looking at a guy who has potential as a creator out of the post on the low or high block, just with turnarounds, with fadeaways, with good touch. Or as a guy who maybe you can run offense to. I mean, this kid's raw. I can't stress that enough. He's like a ball of clay, man. I really think you can mold him into the guy you want to be, but you don't want him in an on-ball or really high-volume role immediately, and I think that's why it's really beneficial here. With Cade Cunningham, with Jaden Ivey, you can utilize this guy as a really effective role man from day one and try to bring him along as a pick-and-pop guy. And I think, Carson, you're pairing up. So you've got two athletic long guards and Ivey and Cunningham. You've got Jalen Duren at the 5 and now Jarris Walker at the 4. You've got a lot of athletes who are really long, who are really versatile. I think there's definitely a capped shooting ceiling with that lineup immediately, but I really like the defensive versatility, the athleticism, and just the young core that you've got here. I wouldn't expect them to, make a crazy turnaround, win a lot of games next season, but I really like the core for the future, and it's a young one that can grow together. I've changed my opinion on Jarris Walker. He's still very raw, but I think Detroit is a really, really good fit for him.
I like that fit too. And I like Asar Thompson more as a prospect. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't know how that fit really works. Like, Asar doesn't need to be your primary ball handler, but I don't know that he really works as your tertiary ball handler behind both Cade and Ivy, especially given his limitations as a shooter, where he's better than his brother, but not a guy who I want to rely on in that spot up role above all else. So I think that Jarris Walker does fill a need. I like the future of this backcourt a lot for Detroit. I think that Cade is special, and I think that Jaden Ivey is very talented. So get yourself a big wing, a four, a versatile guy who has the potential to do a lot of things well. You mentioned he doesn't really excel at anything offensively right now. I do think that he is going to be an exceptional defender, very versatile there. But you do see the ceiling offensively with his build just being insane. 6'8", 240, doesn't weaponize his physicality as much as you'd like him to, but he could grow into that. And then the fact that he's a capable shooter, the pick and pop game will be there. He does have good passing instincts already. So I think that that probably makes the most sense for them. I think he's a better prospect than either of the other wings who you mentioned. And then I think you look at Orlando, and I would like to see them take Asar because I just think that they should be looking for the best talent available. I don't know that there's anybody else who really pushes him there. Maybe you prefer like the comparative polish of an Anthony Black who just feels like he controls the tempo of the game, a
Mm-hmm.
guy who understands how to play out a pick and roll, big ball handler who's going to create. And Orlando doesn't really have that guy long term. Like, I think Fultz does that job well for now. And I guess Fultz is only what, 24 or 25, which is insane to say. But I do think that sort of dynamic backcourt piece could be something they could add. But I think Asar works here. I think that along Fultz and then along the two really, really talented young wings, you take the best player available. And he's another guy who has a lot of the same value as his brother. Very high defensive ceiling, not quite the playmaker that Amen is, but a skilled playmaker and just an insane athlete.
I think you're exactly right. I think this is also the one big position that Orlando needs to fill moving down. You've got two really talented wings, two, I think, cornerstone wings in Wagner and Banchero and how they
Mm-hmm.
play. And you look at the guard pieces they have. Look, you're not going to find a guy bigger on Jalen Suggs than me. You're also not going to find a guy bigger on Cole Anthony than me. But, you know, I think those guys, you can slot them to the bench or slot them in that two guard spot or, slide Fultz over, start him. Neither, these three guys aren't stars. They're really good guards. I like all three of them and what they do individually. Fultz getting downhill. He's been a real rim threat and has gotten back to that. He can get downhill really well. Cole Anthony, a really special shot creator. Suggs, intense effort. When he's on, is a decent shot creator. But Thompson clears them all and has real star upside still. And I think that's why you bank on him. And again, they need a guard. They need their guard of the future. If this hits, you're looking at three guys that they can really bank on. And I like Wendell Carter Jr. too. Here, I think this is a really good landing spot for him. And especially it's a role where, that's an issue with Amen, I think, in Houston is he's going to be tasked with a lot of scoring too. Asar doesn't have to if he goes to Orlando. You can trust other guys to get you 20 a night and dependable offense, and you can just set the table for all these guys. So I think this would be a money landing spot for Orlando and for Asar. There's a lot less pressure here when you have more dependable pieces, and it's Orlando's biggest need, in my opinion.
It would be ideal maybe to have a better shooter just to insert into there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
obviously makes you more malleable in any lineup. But given Fultz's limitations there, Paolo's inconsistency there right now, but above all else, I think you take best player available. And in this theoretical that we've worked out, that would clearly be Asar.